I want to alleviate everybody's anxiety and like let them know that I'm on their team and I'm part of this with them and I want to learn from them.
This is The Book of Life, a podcast about Jewish kidlit. I'm Heidi Rabinowitz. Karben Publishing has been producing Jewish children's books for over 50 years. After the recent retirement of 20-year veteran Joni Sussman, we've got new leadership at Karben with Editorial Director Leila Sales. Here's my conversation with Leila about the behind-the-scenes transition at the beloved institution that is Karben. This is part 1 in my 2-part New Faces series. Part 2 will introduce you to Derek Stordahl, the new owner of Behrman House and Apples and Honey Press. You can find show notes, a transcript, and bonus content at bookoflifepodcast.substack.com. And don't forget, if you'd like to hear Leila's Share Your Shelf segment, you can get access by upgrading to a paid subscription to support the show. Thanks! Leila, I am so pleased to welcome you to the ecosystem of Jewish children's books now that you are leading Karben.
I'm so excited to be part of this community, this huge and creative and well-networked community.
So as many listeners know, Karben is the largest publisher of Jewish children's books, and it's been around for just over 50 years.
Yep.
And many of us who are librarians or teachers or authors have a long-running relationship with Karben, so we are very interested in its inner workings. So in 2024, Joni Sussman retired, and she had been the publisher at Karben for 20 years.
Yep.
And at the 2024 Summer Conference of the Association of Jewish Libraries, she introduced her replacement, Fran Greenman-Schmitz.
Yes.
And I did a joint interview with both of them that aired on the podcast in January 2025.
Yeah.
And I'll link to that in the show notes. So that wasn't very long ago.
No.
And it's kind of surprising that just a little while later, Fran is gone, and we have another new person heading up Karben Publishing, your lovely self, Leila Sales. And I don't want to dig into any dirty laundry, but can you tell us anything at all about this quick turnover? Because I can't help but be curious.
Sure. And honestly, there are limits to what I know. I know what you said about Joni, and I am very much aware of the enormity, I'm going to say, of the responsibility of coming in and inheriting this list that has been created with Joni's vision for 20 plus years. She was an expert in every regard, right? She's an expert on the processes at Karben. She's an expert in Karben's backlist. She knew everybody who wrote for Karben or represented authors who wrote for Karben or probably wanted to write for Karben, And so it's really big shoes to fill. And I did meet with Joni right after I took the job. I went to Minneapolis and we met, and she was very warm and welcoming and, gave me her cell phone number and told me I could call her with anything. And even, there have been a few things that have come up where I just know that the institutional knowledge is there with Joni and I don't have it yet. And it's so great of her that she still will occasionally, she's retired, she's enjoying her retirement, but she's willing to tell me things that she knows when I need it is really valuable. There's honestly not much that I know about Fran's tenure, and I never met her. We didn't overlap. My understanding is that Joni had sort of formed the role of publisher of Karben in her image, and they thought they could bring in Fran to do exactly what Joni had been doing, and they discovered that that was not, in fact, the case, that what Joni was doing worked because she was Joni. So they did some restructuring before they brought me in. Joni, and then Fran after her, had been the publisher. I'm not the publisher. I am editorial director. Karben has been now more integrated into learners' overall systems, which we already had been in many regards. We already had the whole learner design team. Our marketing publicity is now under the same marketing and publicity team that handles all of the rest of learners' imprints.
I had been going to ask you about that difference between publisher and editorial director. Can you explain a little bit about what the difference actually is?
My role is more focused editorially. So, obviously, on acquiring the books, giving the editorial feedback, helping the art director to pick the right illustrators, helping them to give art direction. I come from an editorial background. I was an editor for more than a decade at Viking Children's Books at Penguin. A publisher is going to spend more time in meetings with people from financials, budget, sales and marketing, forecasting.
So is somebody else playing the role of publisher for Carbon?
Yes, so that's now been incorporated into Learner's overall list. And so we now have the same publisher of Carol Rhoda, of Millbrook, of Zest.
So within the Carbon imprint,
Yeah.
you're the editorial director, but a lot of other elements are, as you say, integrated with Learner.
Yep.
Are there other people who are purely working for Carbon, editors and so on, or?
I am the only one who's working purely for Carbon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We share a design team. We share a publicity and marketing team. We share a sales team.
So the people who edit Carbon books are not just editing Carbon books. They're editing books for any of these imprints?
I am the only one editing Carbon books.
Oh, that's a lot of work.
It is. Yeah. So our current goal is 13 books a year in 2 seasons, 6 or 7 in the spring and then 6 or 7 in the fall. Joni had been doing slightly more. So I think our director of sales would like me to ultimately get up to a higher number, but first I need to sort of figure out what it is that I'm doing.
Wow. Okay. That's a big job. I didn't realize what a big job it was that you were doing all on your own.
Yeah, Learner is a small publisher. I come from Big Five, right? So it's just a different experience in a lot of regards. I'm really loving getting to see this other way of approaching publishing. So much about it is just so different. At the Big Five, or at least at PRH, they were really only interested in big books. And any book that you acquired that didn't wind up being big was sort of considered to be, I don't know, a failure, maybe an overstatement, but a disappointment at the very least. If you didn't believe that a book could sell a minimum of 15 or 20,000 copies, my boss would tell me, just don't bother to sign it up. And of course, often you're wrong. You predict a book will sell 20,000 copies and it sells 2,000. Most books don't sell tens of thousands of copies, but you couldn't go into it believing it would sell 2,000 copies. At Learner, that's just not the perspective at all. It seems to me so far to be a lot less directed by sales goals. And particularly at Carbon, I think everybody understands that while, of course, it's great to have a breakout hit that's going to have a really wide audience, the purpose of Carbon is to publish Jewish children's books. And some of those books are probably going to have quite niche audiences. I'm working on a book right now about Lag BaOmer, and I think we all understand and are okay with the fact that probably there aren't tens of thousands of people out there who want a book about Lag BaOmer, and that's okay.
Right, right. And I have to say, I'm excited to hear you're doing a Lag BaOmer book because there are 2 books on Lag BaOmer.
You have to be a small press to do it. My strong feeling on books is not every book has to be for every person, but every book is for someone.
I like that. That's really good. You've worn so many hats in the world of publishing.
Yes.
Can you tell us about some of your varied experiences?
Yeah. I consider myself to be an editor first and foremost. I also am an author, middle grade and young adult novels. I have my first adult book coming out, and then I have my first chapter book coming out 2027. I started doing book packaging. I was director of book publishing for a women's sports brand called Together, and I was creating books to be part of their brand. I sort of had the idea of if you want an audience, if you have something to say, there's probably a book that you could have. And maybe you don't know how to write it and maybe you don't know how to make it, but I do.
Is that the book engineer?
Yes.
Okay, so on your website, I saw that you have this project, The Book Engineer, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about that. It sounds like you're saying that non-book related brands like clothing or what is it that you're encouraging them to also include books in their brand? Tell more about that.
Yes. The Book Engineer is a catch-all for all of the publishing expertise that I bring. But yeah, I think the primary part of it is working with non-book brands in order to figure out what publishing lines look like for them, whether that be just an individual book or an entire imprint or publishing program. So, for example, earlier this year, I worked with the United Way to create a picture book that they could give away at a gala that was focused on kids' literacy. For the women's sports brand I was talking about, they mostly do merch. They do t-shirts, they do hats, they produce TV shows and YouTube shorts and that sort of thing. And so the idea of, okay, you have this audience of people who care about women's sports and you have particular brand story that you're trying to tell. And so what does it look like to tell that through books? So I packaged for them this really great book called Play It Forward, which is a collection of 25 essays about underreported stories of women breaking barriers in sports. Right now, I'm working with a personal financial literacy brand. So I'm creating a line of children's books to get kids to care about personal finance and like understand that money isn't scary or boring.
That's so interesting. It reminds me of a book that probably was not as high quality as what you're talking about. Yeah. When I was a kid, one of the books in my household was actually a advertisement for Jell-O.
Yeah.
And it was a story about the kids wanted to make a present for their mother's birthday, and they tried to sew something, but they didn't know how, and they tried to build something, but it broke.
So they make her a
So
Jell-O.
they made her a Jell-O dessert, and everybody was happy.
Yeah.
You know, I liked it because it had bright colors, and it was about dessert.
Yeah.
But... it didn't have any real literary value, but it sounds like what you're doing is like taking that and putting some actual content into it.
Yes, absolutely. Because it's not supposed to just be an ad. It's more like if you're a fan of something, what are all of the ways in which you can engage with that thing? Books being one of them. I came to the idea because I was looking at how much entertainment out there is in fact funded or produced by brands, right? So there's a great podcast that is produced by Capital One Bank, or there's this really interesting film that is produced by John Deere tractors. They function as marketing, but they are not advertisements. They're genuinely worthwhile content that you would consume because you're interested in it. And I was like, why are books getting left out of this?
I'm just curious what podcast is from Capital One and what movie is from John Deere.
The Capital One podcast is called Champions of Change. Actually, I guess they have a few. And then the John Deere film is called Gaining Ground, The Fight for Black Land. It was at all these film festivals. Emmy-nominated director, The Legacy of Black Farming in America.
All right, that's cool. So I'm just curious, looking at the books that are coming out from Carbon, with all this transition behind the scenes, where is the line? Like, which books are your books?
Publishing generally works a couple years out. So the final files are headed off to the printer a year before the book is published. So all of fall 25, I think, was Joni's. Spring 26, I think those were all Joni's acquisitions. Fall 26, I am actively working on right now. Joni had acquired all of them. Art team had already signed up illustrators, and I came in around the time that we were finalizing sketches for them. Spring 27 books were already acquired, but I've been part of the process of choosing who the illustrators are going to be and doing some fairly substantive edits on the text. I think my Spring 27 authors probably have had the hardest go of this transition because Fran had edited their books and they believed the text to be done. And then I came in, and because it was still before any illustrators had been picked or started sketching, it wasn't too late for me to change text. So for some of them, I had more big picture ideas than for others about how I thought the text could be improved. And then fall 27, about half of the books on it had already been acquired. I have acquired the other half, and now I'm starting to look to Spring 28, and that list is completely blank.
So Spring 28 will be the first purely Leila list.
Yeah.
Cool. Exciting.
It is exciting. It's a big responsibility. Yeah, and just trying to get a balance Every year we want to do a new Hanukkah book, a new Passover book, a new Purim book, a new Rosh Hashanah book, or other high holidays book, right? So those are sort of givens. But then the question of, well, what are those books and how do you have a new take on these topics that we've been publishing books about every single year for many years, and then beyond that, when things are not holiday specific, of having a good balance of age ranges and fiction versus nonfiction and tone and also topic. You don't want to have four picture book biographies about notable Jewish Americans on the same list, right? You want to have ideally something for everybody.
Right. Are there any changes that you're anticipating, either in the general field of publishing Jewish books or changes that you would like to make at Carben?
I don't feel like I yet have a strong enough handle on how everything is done to know for sure what changes I'd want to make. Like, I would never want to be like Elon Musk going into Twitter. It seems to me that one of the goals in all of the books that we select is the hopes that PJ Library might take it for their families, which makes sense because they take such massive quantities. Since so many Jewish families are signed up for PJ Library and they're getting 12 free Jewish books a year, they may not be inclined to go out and purchase yet more Jewish books on their own. But obviously, PJ Library has specific sorts of books that they're looking for. They are not interested in everything. And so one of the challenges that I'm already coming up against is figuring out what are the books that we don't expect PJ Library to take, but that we think are still worth including on Carben's list, knowing that that market wouldn't be there, but believing that another market would be. That's still something that I think I need to figure out.
Yeah.
I'm interested in doing books that have crossover appeal to a wider market because those are ones where you don't need a PJ Library order for those to be a success. I'm still feeling really open to just sort of seeing what's out there and what resonates with me. I'm always thinking about the reader first and what they're going to want to pick up.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, that's interesting about the opportunity and the challenge that PJ Library poses for a publisher like Carben.
Yes.
Are there other particular challenges that you're noticing so far?
For me, it's also coming into this community, which is so well formed. Carben has such a significant backlist. Like, we have so many Carben authors, and I want all of them to feel valued. So many of these writers are so networked, and I have this sense of they are talking to each other about, who is this new person at Carben and what is she doing and what does she want. And I want to alleviate everybody's anxiety and let them know that I'm on their team and I'm part of this with them and I want to learn from them.
For all the authors who may be listening, what are you looking for right now in submissions to Carben?
I am always looking for good stories where there's real conflict, something that immediately hooks your attention, a main character who is relatable and someone who has agency so that they are empowered to take action on their own in order to solve this conflict or answer this question. And that then leads to some sort of resolution that feels earned and not a foregone conclusion. I like humor, adventure, action, whimsy, fantasy. What I would sum up all of that is things that lend themselves to good illustrations. If the illustrations would just be the family sitting around the dinner table or kids sitting around their desks at school, that's probably not going to be as visually engaging.
And in terms of Jewish content, is there anything in particular that you're looking for?
New takes on the holidays are always good. We want to do every year a new Hanukkah book, new Passover, new Purim, new high holidays. So finding new ways to approach those holidays is always good. Then I think stories that incorporate people leading Jewish lives and having Jewish identities and engaging in Jewish traditions, but that the point of the story isn't necessarily to tell you, here is how to lead a Jewish life, or here is what this celebration is or means. That just sort of incorporates those aspects of being Jewish into a story.
I know that just like with children, they're all your favorites.
Yeah.
But for the list of spring 2026, is there any particular book that you would like to call out?
Oh my gosh. One that I think is really interesting is called The Right Blessing. It is about a transgender Jewish child whose parents say the blessing over the children every Friday night. And this child knows that they're getting the wrong gender blessing. They don't know how to tell their parents that because they don't want to upset them. Once they do work up the courage to tell them, their parents are very supportive, and then they get the blessing that they wanted. It's a happy ending. So it's simple, but I think is going to be really valuable for some families.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
That's good. It's wonderful that you are providing that kind of content, because I think that is something that is so needed.
Yes.
It's Tikkun Olam time.
Mm.
So what action would you like to call listeners to take to help heal the world?
Media literacy is really important to me. These days, so many people, either we tune out the news entirely because it is depressing and upsetting, or we are getting news from sources that have an agenda where the agenda is not simply to inform us. So I am a huge believer in National Public Radio. I think they do such good journalism. I believe in them. I donate to them every month. I certainly encourage people to do the same, but also even if you aren't a donor to NPR, I think just listening to NPR is a really great way of knowing what's going on in our world.
Good, thank you. Part of the inspiration for my podcast was Fresh Air with Terry Gross, who also happens to be Jewish.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to talk about that I haven't thought to ask you?
Editing is an art, and it's an art that I take very seriously. For a picture book, to figure out how to make it work can take a really long time. But then the satisfaction when it does work of, oh, it's only 600 words, but every single word is the exact right word in the exact right place, and every page turn brings you something new. That's the best part of this job for me.
Leila Sales, thank you so much for speaking with me, and we all wish you the best of luck at Carben.
Thank you so much for having me, Heidi. I'm really happy to be here.
Author Jane Yolen passed away recently on June 11th, 2026, at the age of 87. She was the incredibly prolific author of 450 books, both secular and Jewish. She wrote the landmark 1988 Holocaust novel, The Devil's Arithmetic, and she was the winner of the 2022 Sidney Taylor Body of Work Award. I interviewed Jane Yolen in 2018, along with her co-author Barbara Diamond Golden, about their book Meet Me at the Well, The Girls and Women of the Bible. I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes, but for now, here is an excerpt of that interview in memory of Jane Yolen.
And then there's a story about, Barbara's tired of hearing talk, the story of Yael.
I'm not tired, but I have heard it a bunch of times.
Which they always bring it up when we're doing a talk, whose story is buried in Deborah's story. And Deborah, we can all agree, first woman judge. There's nothing bad you can say about it. But then there's this little story embedded in it where when the Jews have actually overthrown the Canaanites, who were the fierce warriors with those chariots with scythes on their wheels, and Sisera, the head of the Canaanites, is running away, leaving his men, running away, comes to a little encampment between the Canaanites area and the Jews area. This little group of people were like the Switzerland, right? They didn't dare side with anyone, so they were the safe place for everyone. So he runs in, opens a tent, and goes in, and there's a woman standing there, and he says, "Woman," he says, "I'm tired. Bring me something to drink. I will lie down to sleep." So she brings him something to drink. He lies down to sleep. She takes a tent peg, she puts it on his head and goes, bam, and kills him. And I go, what? Why did she kill him? There is no reason that I could suss out why she killed him. So it was always puzzling to me. And in Bible class, it was just there. It was hanging there. But when we decided to do Deborah as one of them, And we came upon the story of Yael. I did some research in feminist books about the Bible, and one woman was an anthropologist, and she said, look, this is what we know about this community. Hosting was very important to them, as it was to, as we see in many of the Jewish stories. Hosting was important. A woman had to keep herself sacred and apart. So she was living in her own tent. Her husband would come and visit her. Her husband was the head of the community. And when Sisera comes in and he walks into her tent, uninvited, without a male escort from their people, he has already basically called her indecent, called her a woman who sells herself, who opens herself to other men. He also has said she was a bad host because she didn't immediately offer him something to drink or something to eat. So in order to save herself and her husband, both of whom would have been thrown out of the community because she had dishonored herself and him, she had no other way of dealing with this but killing him.
Wow.
Even shrieking wouldn't have done. You had to...
That's quite a story.
Yeah, she's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
Hi, this is David Behrman.
Hi, I'm Derek Stordahl.
And hi, I'm Vicki Weber.
From Behrman House Publishers, joining you soon on the Book of Life podcast. We'd like to dedicate this episode to all of the educators in religious schools around North America who educate our children, and to the authors who put their trust in us as we bring their books to life and into the public eye.
Say hi to Heidi at 561-206-2473 or bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for free to bookoflifepodcast.substack.com to get show notes, transcripts, Jewish Kidlit news, and calls to action right in your inbox. If you'd like to receive the bonus Share Your Shelf segments, you can upgrade to a paid subscription. The Book of Life is also on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and our 20-year back catalog is online at bookoflifepodcast.com. Want to read the books featured on the show? Buy them through bookshop.org/shop/bookoflife to support the podcast and independent bookstores at the same time. The Book of Life is sponsored by the Association of Jewish Libraries, the leading authority on Judaic librarianship. Learn more at jewishlibraries.org. Additional support comes from Congregation B'nai Israel of Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org. AJL also sponsors our sister podcast, Nice Jewish Books, a show about Jewish fiction for adults. Stick around past these credits and you might hear a promo for the latest episode of Nice Jewish Books. Our theme music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening, and happy reading!